it's too little, too late. It's always too little, too late. And for me, what's the most painful thing, that it's like every bullet that wasn't given to Ukraine means that there's some person's life lost, you know, a soldier, a civilian. It's like, if only we had everything we needed at the beginning of the war, it would be all over right now.
We're at the Ukraine Recovery Conference, where we're already hearing pledges of money being put towards Ukraine, but it's estimated of upwards of around 400 billion. How likely is it that you think that this money can be raised and invested into Ukraine, and by when?
Well, I think that's a very conservative estimate. I think it's north of $1 trillion, because don't forget, this war actually goes back to 2014, when the little green men walked into Donbass, when Crimea was illegally annexed. And I remember a figure from a few years ago. I think we were into 40 billion at that time for just that part of Ukraine. So I don't think anyone has a clear grasp. And as one of the ministers or heads of state said today, by the day, the figure gets higher because Russia is continuing its aggression. The goodwill seems to be there. Question remains to be seen is to what extent the private sector will jump into Ukraine. I'm a bit skeptical, because I remember before the war even started, foreign airlines had to stop flying to Ukraine. It wasn't because they were afraid or scared, it was because insurance companies wouldn't cover them. So that is pretty bad. So to me, that indicates for a lot of these companies, even if they want to come in, they do need war risk insurance, things like that.
And there's talks about potentially using Russian frozen assets. What are your thoughts on that? And what sort of difference is that going to have on Ukraine?
Oh, it's going to be a massive difference, because now, you know, like all of the countries, they are spending their money in Ukraine with like helping with military aid, with humanitarian aid. It's all money from their pockets. And we have this huge chunk of money that would cover like, you know, half of the needs of Ukraine. And it can go into action right now, and it could really change the situation. And it's still there, you know, just hanging there. Has been frozen for a year, more than a year. So if we could take this money and just put it into action, that would be amazing.
The UK Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, he said that Russia will pay for the damage that it's done to Ukraine, and that he was confident about that. Are you confident about that?
Well, you know, there is the Netflix series, The Diplomat, and in that, one of the characters described London, right behind me, as the biggest laundromat for Russian money in the world. There is still a lot of Russian money here. They've become experts at hiding these things, signing it into different people's names, putting it under numbered companies. I have a feeling not much progress has actually been made on who actually owns these properties. But I will tell you this, I was heartened just recently, I think in the past 2 weeks, when Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, Canada, where I'm from, said that the government is going to take moves to seize and sell one of those big Russian Antonov airplanes that is stuck at Toronto Pearson Airport, get that money or that plane to the Ukrainian side. So I hope that's a first step in Western governments' efforts to get this money and give it to the Ukrainians. Or it could go, for example, to Ukrainian cultural centers, or to fight Russian disinformation. Or the budgets of all Ukrainian embassies abroad have been cut drastically. It could go towards that. There are many different ways these funds can be spent without it actually having to go as cash to the government, although that is a very big necessity as well. But from what I'm told, here in Europe, it's actually easier to make this type of transition happen from a seized property to actual cash, where in the United States, it's more difficult. But I couldn't agree more with the line I hear in almost every speech today is, they did this, they broke it, they pay to fix it.
And what do you think that Ukrainians need? You know, you talked about homes, livelihoods, things like that. What do you think that the people really need right now?
Oh, for Russia to stop bombing, you know. But yeah, going to work, having a place having a job, having this stable salary that you can, there's a lot of donations happening. Like, I think almost every Ukrainian would give some amount of their money to the army, like every single month, with every paycheck. So yeah, just knowing that, that you have the money and you can kind of live and, I don't know if prosper, but, so that would.
The one thing I am not hearing that really disappoints me, almost makes me angry, is there's no talk of the media sector. In order for this money to come in, you need transparency. You need independent eyes on how it's spent. You need eyes on the government. Even before the war, the Ukrainian media sector was in very difficult circumstances because the ad market was collapsing. Right now, there's almost zero revenue. Something like 200 newsrooms have closed across Ukraine. A lot of journalists have been lost, sadly, probably 60 in total. Many at the front line, they've gone to volunteer or they've been mobilized. And then many have understandably fled to Western Europe. So a lot of effort is going to have to be expended to get that sector up and running again. Ukrainian journalists who are at work and remain on the ground there are doing a fantastic job with little means. But I would like to hear some talk about this. A figure I've heard floating around is about 20 million minimum is going to be needed to get the media sector back up and running. So hopefully that will become a topic of discussion at these reform conferences, but so far nobody is talking about. We need a kind of mini Marshall Plan for the Ukrainian media sector ASAP.
Some predict that the war in Ukraine could potentially go on for years. What would you say is the significance of this current offensive by Ukraine? How essential is it for there to be a breakout from Ukraine?
It's super significant. All of the Ukrainians are really hoping that this will make a difference and that this will be a full stop to the war. But do I believe that it's going to happen this summer? I don't know. I feel that if we had more Western equipment, if we had, those airplanes, jets, if we had, more of everything, more of tanks, more of bullets, more of missiles, more of everything, we could make this huge offensive, just go all in. But because we have to ration all of this, and it's still, thank you for helping us, but it's too little, too late. It's always too little, too late. And for me, what's the most painful thing, that it's like every bullet that wasn't given to Ukraine means that there's some person's life lost, a soldier, a civilian. It's like, if only we had everything we needed at the beginning of the war, it would be all over right now.
President Biden said that the threat of nuclear war was real. And, we've seen Putin move nukes to Belarus. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that that threat is real or substantial?
I think Mr. Putin has a habit of bluffing, of blackmailing the West. I think we're seeing less of it now, but it took quite some time for Western leaders to grow the spine to stand up to Mr. Putin. So I don't think he will cross what's been described to him as a red line he cannot cross. And I think probably the Chinese have told him that, and that's the use of nuclear weapons or tactical nuclear weapons. I think what is more likely, and this scares the heck out of me, but now that we've seen what he did with the Kakhovka hydropower plant, he could do something equally foolish and stupid with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which, by the way, is in Russian hands. This reminds me of a scenario we had in 1986 with Chernobyl, where the Russians were controlling it also at that time. Stupidity ruled the day, a mistake was made, and we had that explosion. Same thing could happen here. Or another scenario is the Russians are not doing very well right now, as everyone knows. As kind of an exit strategy, if you will. They cause some kind of explosion at the plant, they leave, and that territory is contaminated, and we could have a nuclear cloud that goes west or east or north, south, nobody knows. I think Western leaders have to set that red line more firmly with him. And again, I think the The people who probably have the most leverage with Mr. Putin right now is China. They need to step forward more to push Mr. Putin back, because this could be absolutely catastrophic.